American One.
Welcome back to McJ Today or Tomorrow. I am Scott McJunkin here. This is an American One production, and we are very happy to have Dr. Anthony Harper with us back again today. He is a White House correspondent with Intermountain Christian News. He reports from the White House in the middle of the swamp, along with other reporters within the White House press briefing room. And Dr. Harper, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to join you, Scott. A lot of challenging issues, aren't there?
Oh, there are, and I hope that we get through all of them today, particularly ones that we do not that aren't given a lot of attention from the mainstream media. But before we begin, I want to reorient our viewers to kind of understand what your purpose is there in the White House. What is your mission as far as being in the White House press pool?
Well, the main issue is reporting truth on different issues of human rights violations. I've been reporting a lot about anti-Semitism, but also persecution of Christians and the issue of life and freedom. We have a lot of religious freedom issues, rights of free speech that are under assault. And so I'd like to talk about those issues today.
Excellent. And you recently had a question for White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. I believe that happened yesterday. Is that correct?
That happened on Monday, April 25th. So it was alarming, though, that the press secretary didn't acknowledge that we have an anti-Semitism problem, especially when I bring up the word anti-Semitism in my question. And no acknowledgement that is a very serious issue. We've got a lot of problems in Israel with the new prime minister, Naftali Bennett. He's wanting President Biden to help him basically, I guess, look to him like a savior to save Israel out of this Palestinian terrorist problem. But the real problem is with the prime minister, who has compromised Israel's security by having anti-Semitic Arabs in his government to defeat his rival, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
And that seems to be a growing concern with a growing concern amongst Christians in particular, and those who are concerned about anti-Semitism growing in and around the world. And it is in a sharp contrast with how the Trump administration addressed anti-Semitism at home and abroad. I have sensed that the Biden administration has continuously moved away from this issue. Have you seen that from your point of view there on the White House floor? Well,
the Biden administration, as I mentioned, really afraid to address this issue because their own policies are anti-Semitic and that their conversations with Iran and the way that is going. And we can't have anything to do with Iran. It is considered a terrorist country, especially the Ayatollah and his leadership. But we also have the funding of the anti-Semitic UN agency, UNRWA, that the Biden administration is behind. So their anti-Semitic policies speak very loudly. They can say on one hand that they oppose anti-Semitism or that they support Israel, but when their actions show that they are supporting anti-Semitic policies, then the actions speak louder than the words.
And we've seen that happen time and time again, right in front of our eyes. And let's go ahead and take a look at your exchange with Jen Psaki.
Go ahead. I have a question here about following the recent Palestinian terror attacks from the Temple Mount and previous week of attacks that have killed many Israelis and wounded more. Is the Biden administration reconsidering its support of the Palestinian Authority's two-state solution dividing Israel, or stopping the welfare payments sent to the Palestinian Authority who use the money for their pay-to-slay reward system? And I have a follow-up question.
Okay, well, I would just note that I spoke to this last week on Wednesday, where I noted that the United States is deeply concerned by the recent violence in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, and across the West Bank, and we also strongly condemn the recent rocket attack on Israel. You may or may not have seen also that the president conducted a call with Prime Minister Bennett on Sunday morning. He accepted an invitation by Prime Minister Bennett to visit Israel in the coming months, no specific date yet. He took note of the ongoing efforts between Israeli and Palestinian officials to lower tensions and ensure a peaceful conclusion to the holy season of Ramadan. And he also affirmed our unwavering support for Israel and its defense needs, and welcomed the historic $1 billion allocation to replenish Israel's Iron Dome system.
Okay, the follow-up is, in view of continued Palestinian violence against innocent civilians, is the Biden administration willing to stop payments to the anti-Semitic UN agency UNRWA and support restoring the Jewish cemetery in Vilnius, Lithuania, to its former glory?
Again, I think I don't have any changes to announce to our policy. I spoke to our condemnation of the violence just now, last week as well, and noted also our call to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Okay, so that you got two questions there in the White House, and those were excellent questions. But I would like for you to break down what you were asking. There's several points there. So first one I want to kind of bring up is, what is UNRWA and how are they anti-Semitic? Why should we? What is our relationship with UNRWA?
Okay, first people may want to know what UNRWA stands for, this United Nations Relief Works Agency. And this was a humanitarian agency of the UN established when Israel became a nation, because there was a displacement of a lot of Arabs. So it was meeting some practical needs about food and education for medical issues. But it quickly became a propaganda agency to instill hatred of the Jewish people through their curriculum. UNRWA, in their textbooks in these UN schools, portray Israel as the occupier. So the foundation of anti-Semitism is rooted in the belief that Israel is an occupier, and that's what they do in their textbooks. They call this area Palestine. They don't refer this to as Israel. So they just fuel this hatred of Israel, of the Jewish people. So that's a serious problem. And I brought this issue up to the first week of the Trump administration, being called on by Sean Spicer to address the misuse of U.S. tax dollars going into this, that is fueling this hatred. It led to, by the way, after investigation with Senator James Risch help with the General Accounting Office, it led to President Trump defunding this UN agency over, and I upset some people in the UN because of exposing this.
Well, it's definitely something that needs to be exposed, especially if taxpayer dollars are going towards it. And there was a second point that you brought up as well. You said you asked if the White House is reconsidering their welfare payments to the Palestinian to the Palestinian Authority. So tell us about that. That is something new I haven't heard about. And how do they use it for how you called a pay to slay?
Okay, well, for those that may have not heard about the Taylor-Force Act, the Taylor-Force Act deals with this issue about they're using this money to reward families that have had their children killed in service of killing Jewish people. So the families are rewarded for the sacrifice of their children dying in action, killing Jewish people. So it's called the Pay for Slay program. But overall, this administration has been giving money to the Palestinian Authority, supporting the Palestinian cause. But I think people need to realize that there are no Palestinians. This is an invention by the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the back of the year 120 something AD. So he did this to insult the Jews, rename that land the Palestine. So people need to first get a history lesson in this issue, that there is no Palestine and there are no Palestinian race of people. So I think that really should really make their argument fall flat on this matter. And if they want to be anywhere, they could always go to Jordan, but this is the land of Israel, and that Israel's entitled to this by God. It's a covenant that he has with Abraham and his seed. So it's very clear to me. There's a lot of misinformation coming from mainstream media,
and we're not surprised by that. But what we are continuously surprised about, as we saw in the video, that Jen Psaki did not address anti-Semitism directly. She did not call it out. And she said that she condemned the violence, which is always what we should say. We should condemn the violence. But any follow-up action that you were kind of pressing her for, it sounded like she did not want to address it directly. It seems like this is an issue that they want to stay away from, and would rather not hear your questions asked so plainly inside the White House.
Well, I was going to say, Scott, this is a real miracle to be called upon by the press secretary on this issue. I've been waiting for a long time, for over a year, since the Biden administration came into power, to be called on to ask these strong anti-Semitism questions. And of course, there were really 4 parts to the 2-part question. I mean, there were 4 issues brought up in that question, the follow-up question. But they're really foundational issues related to the 2-state solution, which really is a delusion, a delusion that somehow is going to bring peace to the Middle East.
And why is it a delusion? Most people.
But delusion.
Yes. Go ahead.
It's all dealing with the surrounding issues about this false narrative that there is a Palestinian race of people. So I brought up to the press secretary before in an email, but no response from her, is that, given this historical issue with the Roman emperor inventing the word Palestine to separate the Jews from their land, given that there is no Palestinian race of people, I asked her, what is the justification for a Palestinian state? No, like I said, no reply.
No reply. And I think asking the question, keeping that top of mind for him is good, but did you expect them to reply? Did you expect them to come back? Because personally, I don't. I think they're going to continue to avoid this question. However, making sure that it's asked and not being distracted by other events going on, I think that is something that needs to happen continuously. And it sounds like that's something that you're doing on a daily and weekly basis.
Well, you're right. I didn't expect for them to have a good answer on this, but the most important issue is the question, for the questions to be heard. And that's what I've heard other journalists telling me here at the White House, that it is the questions that matter, not their answers.
Yeah, while we're over here distracted by celebrity news and gossip, there's actual real world things that are happening with our allies and the Israelis and how they're treated here and abroad. So I applaud you for taking that step out there in faith, and you got to ask questions, and let's hope for many more in the future.
Well, let's hope so. Pray so. Well, Scott, there, as so many challenging issues to deal with.